Are there any questions? I'll be more than happy to turn those over to Rollin. Yes, sir.
When looking at any one particular tax plan, what's sort of the minimum of information that you all think you need in order to evaluate it properly? And I ask because yesterday, as you mentioned, there was a news conference that said, this is our idea, but didn't really come along with the stuff that I would traditionally expect to see if I was going to try to say, well, this will work or won't work. What's sort of the bare minimum of information that you need in order to say, okay, this is what this particular plan will do?
It certainly helps to actually have a bill and legislation with all those details. We have had the opportunity to sit down and talk through ideas with different lawmakers, concepts, whether or not they would work. The good thing about our task force is we have a good cross-section of people with a lot of different experience in different states that have gone through a variety of reforms in the past, as well as different current experience and areas of expertise. So having the details of a bill certainly helped tremendously. We have that with the 7 that we have out there right now. It's also encouraging to see that even though we have a pretty wide variety in the current bills, that most everything is being put on the table in terms of taxes. We're not picking on one particular industry, on one particular niche, on one even tax, but we're putting all the taxes there on the table and talking about the need to look at all of them collectively, which to us is very important because you pull on one, it impacts the others. And it's important to understand the interaction and the interplay of those different taxes. Yes?
We've heard a lot. Again, I know you're not endorsing or rejecting particular plans, but yesterday there was a lot of discussion about fairness and whether it would be fair to expand greatly the number of services subject to the sales tax. I guess, how are you going to be able to evaluate fairness when it seems to be in the eye of the beholder?
I think that's probably exactly the point, is being in the eye of the beholder. The saying that goes back a while to a former senator, don't tax you, don't tax me, tax that fellow behind the tree. As long as it doesn't impact me negatively, it's okay. But I think the thing that's really encouraging right now is we can't let all these sit on the table and not talk about tax reform. And there's a real willingness to consider all of these things collectively. And some of them will take a little while to work through. Some changes might be a little bit painful at some point in time. But the hope and the expectation is that all of this can be balanced out and found for the best interest of everybody in the state overall, and our economy, and not a particular group or a particular special interest.
And I would add that the bill sponsors of all 7 pieces of legislation have acknowledged that their bills are kind of a mosaic and work together. So it's a challenge for this task force to take those and look at the overall implications. A decision of fairness is a very, very subjective decision, but we can certainly react to the implications of each of the bills and let the reader make a choice.
Yes.
It would seem that your jobs as CPAs will change probably dramatically based on what happens this year. How does your industry stand to win or lose based on what's ultimately decided here?
Certainly our role as financial translators, I personally and my firm and a lot of other CPAs work with our employers as well as our clients to help understand what this means and how to plan for and deal with it. A lot of it has to do with compliance, filing forms and so forth, but I can say from personal experience that there's a tremendous amount of complexity with the system that we have right now, and we're encouraging lawmakers to deal with some of that complexity because some of it seems to be unnecessary. I've had the opportunity of seeing individuals, families, and businesses consider moving to North Carolina and choosing not to because of our current system, whether that be the tax rate or the complexity, or ones that have moved here and are trying to deal with the complexity now and have the experience of what it looked like in another state. So I think going forward we're going to continue to have those opportunities, but right now we're advocating for the tax reform to happen and to modernize and to get more equivalent to where our economy is.
To follow up on Gary's question, are you okay with being taxed on your services?
Knew that was coming.
Yeah, that's always a challenging one, and again, none of us like to feel the impact on us personally, but conceptually, if in the guise of overall tax reform some of us end up paying more or there ends up being some shift, that's probably the nature of it. But we have to look at this collectively overall, what's best for our citizens at large, what's best for our state to be competitive, to continue to progress, to create jobs. So there will be some pain for some, but if it's for the overall better good, that's what we need to
So
support.
if a bill gets passed, you're okay charging your customers more taxes?
We'll have to look at the overall impact.
What I was going to say is our task force will be relied on by our board of directors to figure out what's the greater good, because obviously this association represents a number of CPAs in the state, but we are an entity that will try and look at the best possible solution for the state and react accordingly. And we'll invite our members, and we know our members will be divided on subjects like taxing professional services. So we're going to take a hard look at that. Once we see the actual piece of legislation, and as the representative knows all too well, what's introduced and what comes out isn't always the same thing. So we'll have to watch every committee meeting and every amendment leveled and every floor debate once it makes it to the floor, either the Senate or the House. It's our understanding the House will have a version of their tax reform as well that I think differs from what we've seen Senator Berger and Senator Russo roll out. So we've got a task ahead of us to figure out where our profession needs to be. And we're not the only profession affected, but I think accountants were mentioned at least twice by Senator Berger and then once in his media release. So we know we're targeted and we're going to take a look at it.
I'm struck that you're advocating for form, not delaying action, but you don't know whether you support the bill or not, or whether your services should be taxed as part of this discussion.
When there is a bill, we can decide whether or not we can get behind that and support it. And even so, we have to look at that. We have a lot of variety in our own membership, for example. A lot of different industries represented, those in public accounting, those working for corporations. And so the merits of that have to be considered all collectively. We can't just look at the sales tax in isolation on professional services and say, is that right or not? I think we have to look at the overall economic impact and the impact of all of us.
And if I can squeeze in one more small question on a different topic. Were you as optimistic for tax reform at the start of the legislative session as you are now, as we enter these final weeks, without any major legislation actually on the table yet?
Personally, I'm more excited and interested in it now because we have a lot more to work with. Early on, there was a lot of talk, but we didn't have pen to paper. And now there's a lot of proposals out there. We certainly are hoping that something happens this session. We're far along in the session, and there's been talk of June 1st, let's close, let's extend it to June 15. We're not sure what that means, but we certainly are hopeful that something solid happens.
That was a wonderful question because all of the campaigns for office, governor, Senate leadership, and House leadership said tax reform is needed. And we're on board with that. Based on all the economists' reports, there's no question something positive has to happen. And we're going to be there to work on it. We're excited that at least 7 bills are in there. We don't know which one will survive and get a heartbeat and move through the General Assembly. But we'll be there every stretch of the way, analyzing, evaluating. Our board of directors has an expectation so that we can react to it on behalf of our members, plus for the good of the state. I want to emphasize that.
Question?
I got an email from a friend of mine who's in a business. He does window restoration, and he's real good at restoring these ancient historic windows, but paperwork is not his strong suit. What would be your advice to people who have not had to collect sales tax, who very much, if one of the principles that we're seeing repeated over and over, which is expanding the sales tax base to services of different sorts, how do these folks get ready who have never been in the position of being a trustee for the tax department before, all of a sudden are going to have to start collecting taxes and they have no experience doing it? And that was actually mentioned as a potential problem 3 or 4 weeks ago when one of the tax bills rolled out, and they said, well, we didn't want to expand the sales tax too far because we didn't want to create this mess of people with no experience doing this. How do these businesses who've never had to do this before get themselves ready to do it?
I think that's a very good question. I think it's certainly important for them to stay tuned, to watch what's developing, what's unfolding, the different avenues that tax reform, in particular sales tax, might take. And there are certainly experts out there, CPAs out there to help in those things. We realize that comes with a cost, but there's a significant service that we offer in understanding that. One of the challenges that hasn't been discussed too much is Department of Revenue, as the administrator of any tax laws that come out, will need to get their arms around whatever passes. And that may take some time depending on how significant the change is from what they have right now. They have in the past been willing to and worked on educating the business community and helping them understand exactly what the expectations are. And we fortunately have a very good working relationship with them as well, with the leadership in Department of Revenue, and would hope to work closely with them on addressing any new legislation that passes so that we can help make sure that it's as seamless as possible for our business community and taxpayers.
Any other questions? Well, thank you so much. Thank you again, Representative, for helping us with this. And please, you know where we live, so contact us, reach out to us. Harris, any other concluding remarks?
Question here.
Just easiest question you'll get all day. Would each of you mind just saying and spelling your first and last names into the mic and your position and title?
Rollin Grossclose, Rollin. Last name is Groseclose. I'm a CPA and shareholder with Johnson, Price, Sprinkle, and Asheville.
And I'm Jim Ahler, Jimahler, CEO of the North Carolina Association of CPAs. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all for being with us.
Thank you.